It seems like the government has 1 foot in and 1 foot out of this particular proposal. Why should they go for it, in your view?
Well, it's quite clear we're in a cost of living crisis. Families are finding it difficult to cope, and in the winter this will only get worse. But a windfall tax on the super profits of oil and gas companies, energy companies, could fund a cost of living rescue package that would save the average family up to £1,000 a year. Now, in the current circumstances, that's a lot of money. On top of that, we would like to see an emergency tax cut, slashing VAT from 20 to 17.5%, and that would save families an average of £600 each. So there are things the government can do. They can double the warm home discount and winter fuel allowance with that money and ensure that lower income families can access cheaper broadband deals. You could raise £10 billion from a windfall tax, and that would make a massive difference. And for me, the frustration in this is that the government is taking so long. They are yet again dithering, and that's costing families money and a lot of pain.
That's really interesting, because so far the estimates I've heard are that a windfall tax would raise £2 billion rather than £10 billion, which would be worth around £71, £72 per household. Where do you get the £10 billion number from?
Well, what we have done is you're maybe looking at other proposals from different ones from our ones, but we're looking at a year-long windfall tax on the super profits of oil and gas companies, which would fund this cost of living rescue package and save the average family up to £1,000 a year. I mean, we have done those sums, and the VAT one would work as well, because when a similar emergency VAT cut was brought in 2008, inflation was cut from 4% to 3%. So, I mean, it's there, and we also know that the VAT revenues that the government have had because of inflation have been much higher than Rishi Sunak originally estimated. We think it'll be something like £40 billion over the next 4 years. So the money is there to make a difference to ordinary families. And I don't understand why the government isn't just getting on with it.
It is interesting that we're having this discussion over how money can be raised rather than how that money might be spent. It seems like all of the headlines around this issue is about who might we tax, when the government is getting extra tax revenue in through the inflation crisis anyway. VAT receipts are well up. Indeed, income tax receipts are up as well. The government is getting more money than it expected anyway this year. Do we really need to tax businesses with the risk that may pose to investment in the future, when the government has money in its pockets that it could spend anyway? Isn't it better to talk about how that money might be spent rather than which businesses we punish?
Well, before we spend the money, we have to be able to raise it. We have to. That is why we're suggesting the windfall tax. Yes, we want to spend that money in helping families. Yes, we want to put £1,000 a year back in families' pockets so that they can get through this crisis. Yes, growth in the long term is going to be important. Yes, we need companies to invest, but we need to get through this short-term emergency. And that is why it's important that the government spends money on helping families. And to do that, we are proposing a way that they can raise the money to do that. We're proposing two ways: an emergency tax cut in VAT and a windfall tax on the super profits. Now, remember, the oil companies themselves have said that these profits would not, if they were taxed, affect their ability to invest. Their investment plans were made, they make them over 5-10 years, and they did them in advance of the inflation and the energy price hike that we are seeing. So those plans for investment are already there. And we're not talking about long-term taxation. We're talking about 1 year, one-off in an emergency.